Light show today. Nothing going on except for quarterbacks and receivers, the two, maybe outside of offensive tackle and maybe defensive tackle, the most fixated on positions for Penn State football fans and recruiting fans. So it's a big week. Quarterbacks, all kinds of quarterbacks coming to Penn State this weekend and this past week. And of course, the people who know all about that stuff, including the receiver outlook for 2025 and possibly beyond. We're going to have that conversation on the show today. Matt Zollers, I got to get that name in. Matt Zollers. We're going to be talking about that here in just a few minutes.
He's the middle point on your bingo card, like the free,
the free space.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't wait 20 minutes extra this week. I said it within the first 60 seconds of the show so that people know it's a big week for Penn State football. There's a lot coming up, and Ryan Snyder kicking us off. What's the level of importance here that we're talking about with this particular prospect?
So it depends on how you want to look at this. Like if they miss on Matt Zollers, is it the end of the world? No, because obviously they have Kritza, you got Grunt. They have depth there now where, a couple of years ago, when you saw that depth disadvantage, I guess, when you had Levis and that whole situation moved on, like that was way more important in my eyes, as far as building depth in your quarterback room. Now, with that said, he's the best player in Pennsylvania, or top ranked player in Pennsylvania, we'll say. You can't let those guys get out of your reach, especially when you were the one who really kind of stayed on him most steady, I would say. I mean, Pitt was in there. A couple other schools were in there, but Penn State has been pretty steady throughout. And then you have a school like Georgia pop in, a school like Missouri pop in kind of late, but got his attention enough that they're serious contenders. You don't want to lose on those recruitments. So I don't want to overplay this and say this is a 10, a 9, because I don't think it is, just because of, again, the depth they have there. They do have Kritza. They feel good about Kritza. It's not the end of the world if they miss on him. And hey, if they were, that scholarship can be used at receiver, some other positions that could benefit them down the road. But again, he's an incredibly talented player you don't want to play against, put it that way. And they probably won't, because again, he's probably not going to stay in the Big Ten, but somebody they certainly would not want to be playing against down the road. Yeah. So important, yes. End of the world if we were to go elsewhere. I wouldn't go that far.
Yeah, the odds are he lands with an SEC school, because 50% of the schools in his Final Four are SEC schools. So we'll get into a little more of that conversation and the quarterbacks in general here in just a second. Fitz, receiver is the other main topic in today's show. So what did we learn in the last week about the receiver position? Seems like there was some movement or some news about some of the top targets that are we starting to see an identification of who those guys might be, and kind of a stratification of what we've described as a pretty thick but even board of receiver prospects?
Yeah, thick with 2 C's, because there's a lot of guys on there. It's a big board. I don't know if it's about prioritizing or identifying top targets. We've had Quincy Porter pretty much as the guy to look to as the top target. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to come here. I don't think he's going to come to Penn State. But you look nationally. Phillip Bell has set up an official visit. Taz Williams, who is from Pittsburgh, but he lives in Texas now. You got some Florida guys, Samari Reed. You got such a large and diverse board, and it's really, really funny when you take a look at all the hand wringing from late November to March now, because now it's like, oh wait, there's too many guys, there's too many names on here. Like, how do we deal with this? So it's very
who do I root for if I'm a Penn State fan? Who do I root to add to the roster?
Yeah, if you're looking for the dark comedy and things, and that's the other thing. Like, who do you root for, Ryan? When we talk to people that we trust, everybody's got a different opinion. Like it's not, this is my guy, or it's more, this is my guy, this is this guy's guy, because there's a lot of really good players out there, and there's a lot of really good players in the slot. There's a lot of really good players on the outside. They've got Lyric Samuel committed, who I think is a really good player as well. So it's not a situation, given the context of Penn State's wide receiver room over the last couple of years, where you just look at it like the corner room and say, hey, they're going to get some good corners. It's going to be a good cornerback class. Like, they got to get the right guys, obviously, but there's a pool in which to do it that they haven't had for, I would say, a long time. There's a lot of guys on this list, and there's some really good guys on this list that are going to be shut out just because of numbers. And it's a good problem to have, before you get to the next step, which is developing these guys for the college game. And given how wide receiver recruiting is, yes, there's a ton of wide receivers out there. There's probably, I haven't looked on this, probably more receivers on 300 than there is any other position, just because it's very, I don't want to say easy to stand out, but when you play receiver, when you're that athletic, when you're playing around guys that are your age that just aren't as athletic, you tend to pop. And those guys, some of those guys take off, or some of those guys are early bloomers. Some of those guys take off late. There's no right answer on this. And that's why when you take 4 in a class and you hit 2, you feel pretty okay about that. When you take 5 in a class and you haven't hit one of them, like, Penn State hasn't done in the 22 cycle, so to date, excuse me, and that's where it gets dicey. So, you feel confident that Penn State's going to sign some guys, and you're going to look at those tape and you're going to say, hey, this is a really good player, but then it's all about development from there.
You mentioned feeling confident, and one of those areas in life you always want to feel confident about is your financial future and your outlook, and My Perfect Franchise can help you with that. If you are a corporate middle management executive, somebody who has business experience, and you're ready to leave the rat race for the American dream and to own your destiny, look for a side hustle. Maybe you have a lot of experience and you have a lot of different things on your plate and you want to diversify, build wealth, maybe leave a legacy for your family. My Perfect Franchise can help you do that. Andy Ludicky has been a longtime sponsor here on the show. You can call him, 404-973-9901. I am team call people. Always will be. But you can also email him, Andy at myperfectfranchise.net, or you can go to the Blue White Illustrated message board and send him a message there as well. So what does he do for you? He helps you find the right franchise to manage. You buy into a franchise, it's an established business, and then you own your own franchise, in that company. And Andy has personal experience doing this. He's ready to share his knowledge with you. And more importantly, he's ready to get you in the right business with the information that you already have, the expertise you already have, and his insight into the navigating the waters of being a franchise owner. If you're considering this, you can take a bunch of different levels of this. You can do brick and mortar. You can do something that is much less labor intensive. You can do hands-on or day-to-day management. You can do hands-off management. All these different opportunities to suit what is going on in your life. And the best part is you don't have to listen to me. He knows about it. Services are 100% free. He's here to help if you have any questions about business ownership. Check out the Blue White Illustrated message board, or once again, Andy at myperfectfranchise.net, 404-973-9901. Thanks again to Andy for being a sponsor of the show. Let's dive back into the Matt Zollers conversation, get a little, roll around in it here. And I think Cheng Yifeng has the question that everyone wants to know. Ryan, how confident
I don't know.
Should we be about Matt Zollers?
You don't even got blah, 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 blah. I don't know.
If you want finality on this,
go ahead,
it's
Sean.
not happening because he's got visits coming up. I know that we want everything to be black and white, but this is a situation where he's taking visits and going to these visits undecided. We're telling you that not because that's, what's going to continue to get clicks and stuff. We're telling you that because he's going into these visits undecided. That's truly it. And he added another visit this week, as Ryan confirmed for our Alabama site.
Yeah, so that's one of the, I guess that's one of the things that I think a lot of people have perceptions of this is a Pennsylvania kid. He obviously knows Penn State more probably than Missouri. So I think the hope is there's a little bit of a bias there that he's leaning one way or another. And what you guys have been consistently reporting is he's trying to do this, or he is doing this the right way, where he's going in with a clean slate for all these schools and is evaluating them and comparing and contrasting them on these visits. Ryan, is that an accurate way to depict what's happening this week?
Yeah, I remember this isn't a year and a half recruitment like so many other players that we're going to discuss here. I mean, this has really been a recruitment that, remember, Penn State offered in the beginning of November. Sure, he's been up to Penn State many more times before they offered. But when you look at kind of when Penn State offered, a couple other schools offered after that. But really, he blew up in January. And, the January is a contact period now, so coaches can come in, talk to these guys. They used to not be able to do that with the players of his class. It could only be seniors. So that really kind of exploded his recruitment. That's where the Georgias and the Missouris came into the mix. Now he's going to Alabama the day before Georgia. I don't know how widely reported that's been so far, but there's another visit added there. And sure, he's never been to Alabama before, and I know Nick Saban's not there, but it's still Alabama. So this is a situation where, yes, Penn State has the familiarity angle, Pitt, his brother plays at Pitt. I mean, I think we've got that out there enough that people should know. Yes, he's walk on. I don't know his brother too well, but like his brother is on the Pitt roster, and he's visiting Pitt today. He will be at Penn State tomorrow. Take a break. Go to Alabama on Sunday? No, Monday. Either way.
Yes.
I go to Alabama, then to Georgia, April 1, Alabama, April 2nd, Georgia. Fly
Monday,
home,
Tuesday.
and then he's gonna make a decision, I guess, on Thursday. So honestly, I'm kind of surprised he put an April 4th date out there. To me, I thought he would take another week or so to think about it. So it seems quick, but I also think it speaks to how quick and fast moving this has all been, and he probably wants to get it over with. So we'll see. I felt for a long time that yes, there's a lot of look. 5-6 years ago, I would absolutely lean towards Penn State as a favorite because of relationships and all these things. In NIL, it makes it so much harder now in this world to kind of know, because I have no idea what kind of money's being thrown at him at some other schools. And I don't know how even important that is. Like, that's not something he's really opened up about. So a lot of ways this could go. This is one that's truly wide open right now. And, I'm sure you'll see some RPMs and crystal balls and stuff maybe go in on April 3rd. But right now, this feels pretty wide open to me.
Fitz, what do you think of the situation here with Zollers? Just kind of a big picture sort of thing.
Yeah, I agree with him, with Ryan, especially about that April 4th date. Like, I can see him getting through these visits and be like, okay, I don't need any more information, because any more information might send me the other direction in terms of making that decision, and just clouding that decision. So I think that's probably his reasoning for doing so. Penn State's been in it a long time. This is not a situation where Penn State was like lagging behind and stringing them along. Like, they offered before anyone else. So it's a really interesting case study from that, because they've been on him since before they offered, before anyone offered, really. Got him in camp a couple of times, were really high on him, and then saw the junior film and were like, okay, well, this guy, like, and I appreciate that as an evaluation, because sometimes you kind of sit there and be like, do we trust ourselves in what we're seeing? And Penn State did that with Matt Zollers. So yeah. I think they did everything right in that situation, but it's a matter of like his big time programs right here. Georgia, Alabama, doesn't get much better than that. Like, and it's a situation where this kid is going to want to see some things. Missouri has been, I hesitate to call him a dark horse, because we've been talking about him for a long time, but like the NIL aspect of what Missouri has done on the trail, like, has been impressive. They have gotten guys that you don't think Missouri should get. And that's kind of the measuring stick when you talk about this in the public sphere. So like, legitimate offense, legitimate success that they've had, like they're certainly in this, and they've already had them on campus. My question with Missouri is like, does that fade? Like, you're going to see 3 more schools. You're going to travel across the state to see his brother at Pitt, and spend some time at Penn State. By the way, Penn State's schedule this week has been adjusted for practice for Easter weekend. It's going to be Friday. It's not going to be Saturday as we would usually see. So we're going to see how much, see how deep this visit goes. He knows pretty much, like, he knows more about Penn State than pretty much anyone. I would say Pitt is in that mix too, because his brother can give him the insights from the program that he can't get anywhere else. Go ahead. Yeah,
I was just, so what's the, I don't want to say what's the value, because obviously you're making a final pitch here, but what does Penn State hope to get out of this visit if he is so familiar with the program? He's been quite a few times, Pennsylvania kid. I guess either of you, whoever wants to answer the question, like, without going into like, well, here's the itinerary, what are you hoping to do if NIL is what it is and the relationship is what it is, and he knows, like, what is coming out of this for Penn State?
Well, I mean, what's coming out of it, you're charging at him full speed right now. Like, you are going 100% because he is not committed to you. Like, this is like, you're asking the question as if he's committed to Penn State and Penn State has to fend off everyone else. I don't think that's the case. I think this is a situation where he's truly uncommitted, and you give him, like, you come in the bottom of the ninth and you give him your Mariano, man, I really messed that up. Mariano Rivera fastball cutter combination, and go at him as hard as you possibly can, and hope that somebody else doesn't hit a homer off of you. So like that's kind of where you're sitting with Penn State, is like, you got to get this one over the line, because as much as I agree with Ryan in that not everybody, like, no kid is a must get, no kid is is vital. This is the most important position, and what hasn't Penn State done over the last decade, beyond decade, let's go back multiple staffs, is stack quarterbacks. Like, and they've done a really, really good job with Aller and Bo. Then you bring in Smolik, and then you bring in Grunk last year, who's really good. Like, that's a really, I'm don't want to say it's as good as of a run as they've had, but like that's a lot of talent right there.
Yeah.
And you continue to add to it. They've got Kritza, but you continue to add to it with Zollers, and all of a sudden you're inching forward. Like the difference between Ohio State and Penn State is at that quarterback to receive in the passing game. We'll say that, right? In the passing game is much different. Penn State or Ohio State's been able to attract these guys over and over and over again. That's how you, I don't want to say fall into a CJ Stroud, but like a CJ Stroud was in a situation similar to Zollers, where you're a borderline 5-star, but not necessarily the top guy in the class, but then all of a sudden becomes the top guy. So like that's what you're aiming for if you're Penn State, and you got to continue to go on that track, or else it could fall apart.
Yeah. What I really meant when I asked the question was, is Penn State at its ceiling of the idea of he knows everything about the program, what else is he going to learn? And like kind of, you might get that, treading on new snow sort of feeling when you go to Georgia or Alabama in the next couple of days in like Penn State's old hat. So I guess Ryan, Andy Kotelnicki, the quarterback conversation, how is that a big part of this weekend?
Spring practice, seeing that up close, seeing the offense up close, seeing, sure, they've done the chalk talks, they've seen the film. I'm sure they've watched a bunch of Kansas film, but actually getting up there and seeing it, I think that's probably one of the biggest things you can take away. And, Sean said it's going all out and really hammering home a lot of the points that make Penn State what Penn State is. And he fits a lot of those things that, Penn State fans and their coaches really covet. So there's reason to be positive in a lot of ways. It's just, man, there's so many. Again, because this recruitment really went so fast in 3 month span, that's what makes it so hard to read, because those visits, that Georgia visit's only his second time at Georgia. And, he's got a lot more to learn there, which could be good for Penn State. Could be bad. It's hard to say.
Yeah. Well, we'll be following this as it goes on. Of course, check out bluewhiteillustrated.com for the latest when these guys get the information that you want to know. Some clarity after all of this stuff. It's a very important week or so to be subscribed to bluewhiteillustrated.com. And if you want to subscribe right now, we got a special sweetheart deal for you. 2 months for $1. That's because you listen to the podcast, you watch the YouTube show. We thank you for that, and we want to give you a little bit extra. Normally, you just get a month for $1. We're giving you into the summer, into official visit season with code PSU1 when you sign up at Blue White Illustrated. It's not just Matt Zollers, 2026. Fitz, we talked about this to end the show in the mailbag on Wednesday about the 3 quarterbacks that have come recently to campus over the last week or so for 2026. If you would, recap who those players are and kind of the set the table for the next round of hand-wringing about Penn State getting a top quarterback.
Yeah, we talked about this on the show yesterday in the mailbag, so check that out if you get a shot. But Penn State has had a lot of talented quarterbacks, especially in the 2026 class on campus over the last 2 weeks. Dia Bell, the son of Raja Bell, came up from Florida. That's a guy that's visited a lot. And that's one of those ones that sends up signals. And hey, Texas just offered, Ohio State just offered. The competition for this kid is going to be off the charts. Penn State did a nice job getting in early and being one of the top schools early. And I don't think he's ready for a decision now, but this is a 26 that could be off the board before his junior season. So that's one to watch. Mm-hmm. Troy Hune came in from California, went to Michigan, went to Ohio State. He's picked up offers, I think, from both of those. I don't know if Ohio State's pulled the trigger yet, but he's a good player. Brady Hart mentioned him yesterday as well. He's got some Pennsylvania roots, although it looks like Notre Dame is the team that has his attention very early. Florida just offered, and his dad played baseball at Florida. So that's I think both parents may have gone to Florida now that I think about it. So there's a lot to like there. And then earlier this week, Faison Brandon from North Carolina, I believe #1 quarterback in the country in the class of 2021, according to On3, picked up an offer from Penn State. That was kind of inevitable with him visiting, but not too far. I mean, Grimsley, North Carolina, not too far. Penn State's got some roots down there. Danny O'Brien, has spent some time there, played at Catawba or finished his career at Catawba. So he's got some connections down there. Ty Howell, of course, as well. So it's too early to get stacking these guys in terms of big boards or anything like that. But Penn State's getting a lot of talent on campus. Not out of the ordinary. They usually do this. I mentioned Julian Sain was on campus 2 years ago. That's kind of the way that these quarterbacks do their research, is getting on campus during spring ball and doing their spring break trips and things like that. But it's been a situation where Penn State has gotten a lot of talent on campus on par with those schools that you want to compete with, that you want to be in the playoff with. So I think that's a good sign for not only the program as a whole, but Danny O'Brien as well.
Ryan, I believe you talked to Dia Bell to follow up on his his visit to Penn State. What did he have to say? What was your impression of that conversation?
Diabell's been the one I've had circled. As Sean said, I mean, he's visited the most, and that's the easy place to start, right? He's been on campus pretty much 3 times since the end of July, which is impressive considering, again, he's down in Florida. Certainly the guy that I would have, if I had to make a prediction or somebody that if they could land one of those top 5 guys out of Troy Hune and Faison Brandon, Diabell, those 3 are all ranked top 5 for on 3. Dia would be the one. Now, it won't be easy, though. Let's make it very clear. LSU's very much in the mix. Miami's in the mix. He's been to a ton of schools. I do think there's a real chance he makes a decision this summer. I do think Penn State could potentially be top 3 with those 2 schools right now. There's a lot of positives, I guess, from a relationship perspective that Penn State's able to been building really for a long time with his father and his mom. So I feel good that Penn State has a real chance there. Wouldn't say they're the favorite or anything like that. That's still going to progress a little bit. But, what Diabell was able to do at American Heritage last year, which is such a talented school down in Florida as a sophomore, really impressive. So, I mean, he's the real deal. Go ahead.
Just explain that a little bit. I mean, for people that don't understand what American Heritage is, like, and the Florida.
It's one of those schools you see on ESPN all the time. Put it that way. Like it's a stacked program. Usually produce a handful of Division I players every year. Shoot, sometimes even more than that. I mean, if you want to talk about FCS level and up, I mean, man, there's been times where 2/3 of their team is going to play Division I at some sort of a level in different years. So just come in there as a sophomore, right? I mean, because there is so much talent. Beat out. I know he beat out one player. I forget if he's FCS or FBS kind of lower caliber guy. I had someone explain that to me before. But still, beating out older guys and coming in and really taking control of a team that's as stacked as talent as it is as a sophomore, be able to understand all the different nuances that go along with that. That's really grabbed Penn State's attention and a ton of other schools' attention too. And Faison Brandon too. I had to talk with him as well just yesterday. A very good first impression. He's one of those guys that, like, okay, if he gets back in the summer, comes to a camp, comes to a Lash Bash, I'll start taking that a little bit more seriously because he did just do a big kind of spring tour. Right. Fortunately, Penn State was one of the schools to get him. But when those guys do those tours, you kind of have to read that in different ways, right? Is Penn State a school that he really, really likes, or is he just kind of hitting it because it's in the area and a school he wants to see but maybe doesn't covet or anything like that? So again, with him, come back in June, comes back in July. I'll start taking him a little bit more serious. With Troy Hune being out in California, same kind of situation. Let's see if he gets back here anytime soon.
Fitz, I was just going to ask you about that, of just the California players in general, and fun to see, but the reality of that. And I guess the other thing is, how much do you balance this with, as you mentioned, getting top quarterbacks to visit Penn State is good, but also we didn't know about Ethan Grunkmeyer until about this time last year. So how much are you keeping the door open for that?
Yeah, that's a couple things on that. First off, we've seen guys that have jumped onto the radar very early that just kind of faded. We talked about Jaden Bradford last week, but the thing that's different about, I think, this crop is, hey, Faison Brandon 6'3.5". Diabell's listed at 6'3". I don't have his numbers ahead of me. I know that he was listed
6'3", 190. That's legit.
6'3", 190. We'll go. Or
no, he's not 6'3" yet. He's not 6'3" yet. I think.
Okay, but he's not 6 foot. Okay, so that tells me that this group is going to continue to develop. But you got camps coming up. You've got spring evaluation periods. So this board is going to continue to evolve. It's great to be in with the guys that are ranked high very early, but it's better to be in with the guys that fit what you're doing, and eventually you get that evaluation. So I think there's no right timeline for this. I mean, Zollers was a complete late bloomer, whereas you've had guys that have been on the radar forever. So I don't know. It's tough to talk around that, especially live, because there's no right answer to when the best quarterbacks emerge. Like there's no, like I was talking, there's no right formula for offensive tackles, whether you're 235 or you're 310 pounds. You can develop into a prospect. It's about finding the right guy that fits your system, and that's going to be interesting to see how Andy Kotelnicki does it and how they do it with Danny O'Brien, because they really want to keep him on staff for a while.
Yeah,
Matt Zollers, great example.
Do we want to have that conversation about the analysts and allowing analysts to coach? It's not on the rundown, but I know it's super important to the conversation about quarterbacks. So I guess, can you give Ryan, just give people the highlights of the conversation around the rule proposal that's come back up for college football?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this has been in motion for a year and a half now. I mean, when the graduate assistant rule changed, what was that? Was that last summer? I want to say maybe When did Danny O'Brien move from offensive analyst to graduate assistant? Was it maybe April or was it
last year?
Maybe May?
Yeah, it was last year.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's been about a year now since then. We'll say that. Like that's when this all was going into motion. Like basically, graduate assistants are being faded out, and now they can pretty much be paid substantially more than they used to be. I don't know if there's a cap on that or not. I'm not sure if they got completely rid of the credits that they have to take and all that stuff. But when that rule started going into place, that's when the rule that you're talking about, T. Frank, that was proposed somewhat recently, this is like step 2 of that is how I kind of look at it. So this has been in place. This has been in motion for a while now. It's going to be just a matter of time until offensive analysts, defensive analysts, they can all be out on the field to some level. They can pitch in and coach to some different degrees, we'll say. But it's been just one of those unforceable rules that, there's no reason to keep going. And I understand why they had it, because they didn't want everybody's staff to keep growing. But guess what? It's already happened anyway. It didn't matter. And it's going to keep happening no matter what. So like, what are we doing
theme. That seems to be the theme of all of these NCAA rules is like, hey, that we don't want this to happen. Well, it's already happening, so you might as well get with it. Fitz, is there a concern of, how do I phrase this? The haves having more because the larger the staff you have, can you have?
We're already there. We're already there. That's what look at the 12 team, look at the 14 team playoff. Look at how it just, Sorry to cut you off, Sean, but the NCAA doesn't even want to get, first off, the NCAA doesn't want to get cut out. Like they have to do all these changes that are 80%, of the AFC, we'll say the AFCA, right? The Coach Association. There's a bunch of really popular things within that association that the NCAA has pushed back on for a couple, 4, 5, 6 years, however it is. But now we're getting to the point where the NCAA's power is pretty much gone, and they are just trying to stay in the mix and not get cut out. So yeah, they better start allowing these rules that all these coaches want, because if not, they're just going to leave them behind.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Sorry to cut you off.
Is there a theoretical limit to staff size? Can you have a coach for every player? Just taking it to an extreme that makes no sense.
But they'll be hiring you if that's the case. You need 120.
Sure.
Frank. There you go.
It's going to come with the Big Ten and SEC, moving in that direction away from everyone else. Like budgets are going to come into play here, and that's how it's going to work.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about receivers, and let's stay out west. Phillip Bell. I think, Ryan, you tweeted about this. Phillip Bell relationship a little bit better with Penn State than you expected. Can you just elaborate on what you did you write about this, I think?
Yeah, Sean, is he part of the Cali Power Group? Do you know? Like, what's his relationship with Kritza? Do you know?
Yes, he came, I don't know Cali Power, but he came with Kritza and that group last spring. So it was, oh my gosh, I'd have to look up all the guys that came from California. I mean, there was multiple guys in there that were top 100 guys, just kind of out of nowhere. But it's that group with Kritza, with Keandre Barker, with TC Cunningham, those guys in there. So there's that relationship tied to that West Coast 7-on-7 group. So he's been on campus before, which is good, but he's been everywhere basically.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I mean USC, Ohio State. I mean, he's got a bunch of really good official visits. Is Penn State going to probably land him? I'd still put it kind of somewhat low, but. The fact that he's getting back for an official visit, the fact that he's close friends with Kritza. I mean, I wrote a story on him just this morning, and he talked about the relationship with Kritza a bit. So, those are all positive things, but they're going to have to beat out, Ohio State, Tennessee, USC, Washington, schools that he's been to multiple times before. I mean, Penn State's one of the few that he's only been to once, honestly. So it's an uphill climb, but, having that wide net, right, Sean? I mean, Sean, we were talking about Texas wide receivers earlier, like, Kelshawn Johnson was one we didn't even mention, as far as like a big national guy that I really kind of still need to learn more about. That official visit kind of surprised me, and maybe Khalil Lockett will get thrown in there. They're casting a really wide net.
Make a board out of Texas wide receivers, which would be a good idea, a good way to build your things, even if they're 6A. Like Shedeur Sanders says they can't play, but they can play. No, I mean it's a group where. I mean, you just continue to push and push and push, and then hope that you have to make the decision later. Like, I know that those are tough decisions, but you're better off in the position to make that decision than to be scrambling at the end to try and grab somebody late.
Right.
So you mentioned the official visits. I believe there were almost 10 that you guys were talking about. What does that number mean to you as far as positive sign? Doesn't mean anything. I guess, how do you guys feel about whatever the number was of receivers visiting for official visits?
I think that's right. I could see a couple more being added. Like I could see it getting closer to a dozen. It's a very important position. They probably got to add at least 2 more guys, 3 more guys. Now, again, not all those visits are going to take place. Let's remember that. Like you set them up now. I think there's a couple more guys they like to lock in visits with. But if you got, I think they got at least 3 more scholarships to give. You try and bring in twice that amount, 3 times that amount, and hope you can land 3 or 4 of them. I think it's about right.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you guys want to talk about with receivers? I know official visits in general is something we learned more about this past week, but I just want to give, because the receiver position, there's so many different ways we could go with this. I don't want to go the wrong direction. Fitz, is there anything else interesting that you've seen recently?
I mean, it's standard procedure here. Like, you understand the situation that they're in at wideout, and your quickest fix is through the portal, but also your quickest fix is to fix the whole room. Like, I mean, there's no right way to go about it. You're going to find out if these guys, do you prioritize a guy that can play right away? Do you prioritize a guy that can be, hey, he can be really good in 3 years? Like, there's no right way to go about it. I'm curious to see how the chips are going to fall, because you look at this list and there are guys on this list that you say, I can see him in this class. I can see Lex Cyrus in this class. I can see Romero Ice in this class. Romero Ice popped up on campus again this week. You can see Desi Jones in this class. It's just, you just keep going down, and there's some really good players there. Jeff Exenor is a guy that we've mentioned a bunch. Like, there's a combination of guys that eventually will fit into it, but you just don't know what the right combination is yet. And then again, you got to develop them when they get on campus.
And here, Ryan, you get my favorite unfair question, but given 2022 had 5, I think if you even can consider some players moving around that had position versatility at 6 with I think Mekhi Flowers moved over to receiver. I think it was from safety. So what's the size of this class given 2022 was a bumper crop? I haven't seen anything. And then 1 and 3 the next 2 years. So what's the positional outlook you think?
I mean, I think 3 more is realistic, and then it depends on the order and who's available and who's interested. Maybe after you get to that third, say you get 2 more commitments, right? What will determine 4 or maybe even 5 is just what's available, who's interested, and what you really need. Like, to me, I feel pretty not safe, but if I had to put chips down on guys who are going to end up at Penn State, Jeff Exner and Lex Cyrus would be the 2 that I would put the chips down. So say those 2 are in the board. Well, man, if you had a Samari Reed in Florida who's really shooting up their board, you have a Matthew Otten who we haven't even talked about, who I know pretty high on their board, or you got some of these truly other national guys, these Texas guys who maybe have Penn State in their top 2 and you really want to push it all out for. Well, that's how you get to 4 or 5. I think 4 is a safe number. I should say that's how you get to 5. So we'll see. I think you got to add a true slot guy, and I think Lex Cyrus and Romero Ison, I believe it is, they make the most sense right now when you look at that position. And then you add, a couple others in that 6 foot, the 6'3" range, and try and find a little, true X and true Y guys, I guess you'd say, or true Z guys, I should say, and see where the cards fall.
Fitz, official visits. What's coming up with that you're interested in, or what we learned recently?
Yeah, if you noticed last week, last Friday, a bunch of people got their graphics, and they went pretty big on official visits. So Penn State's got a bunch lined up for the summer. You can check them out on the site. Ryan did just a necessary recap of everything that they've got this summer. So you're going to start in late May. You're going to go through the end of June, and that's kind of how they set up. I'm going to pull it up here, because I couldn't get it while I was talking, but I'm there now. But yeah, it's a good group. Big groups on the first couple of weeks. The commits are going to come in and make it the biggest group on the weekend of June 14th. And then you kind of pick your spots there. You got important visitors on that weekend of the 14th, like Zaire Addison, who's actually going to be on campus tomorrow. Jameer Joseph from New Jersey. We've talked about him a lot. Taz Williams, we just talked about as a receiver. So it's about balancing. It's about finding the right guys. It's about pushing early. If you take a look at that first weekend in June last year, resulted in 4 commits. If you count Jalen Harvey, who committed that weekend, and then eventually got there. But it's that's kind of how those things work. Is you push early to see what they've got, and those kids need to decide whether they need to take more visits or if they've found what they wanted. Derek Plaz actually committed that first weekend, then found it a couple weeks later that he wanted to take more visits. So
it wasn't even a couple weeks. It was like 4 days or something like that. It was insanely quick.
It all ran together at that point. So it's a busy month. It's a great month. It's a great month to try Blue White Illustrated, because that's it's going to be where the news is originating from. So check that out when we get there. But until then, that's going to be the game, is setting up for official visits. Now, you might be able to snipe off a couple of kids. Of course, Zollers is announcing next week. That's a high priority. You might be able to snipe a couple of kids before you get there, but June, July, once again, shaping up to be the busiest time of this recruiting calendar, as it has become in the last 2 or 3 cycles.
Yeah, Ryan, not trying to backdoor you into a Matt Zollers commitment prediction, but do you think that they have the opportunity to add anybody over the next before the official visits, in the next month?
Commitment wise, sure. I mean, Zollers obviously was circled. There's going to be guys who maybe have come for a spring practice or two, circle back for blue white. I mean, what's the hit rate on blue white commitments? It's pretty high over the years as far as they're getting somebody like Caleb Brewer last year, right? Was kind of somebody we didn't really expect come, and then boom, he ends up committing that day. So I would certainly, like, Zollers, blue white weekend. There's a good chance something can happen around then, but I will stress, though, that the majority of these guys want to take their official visits. Majority of the guys that Penn State is in the mix with hold the cards, if that makes sense. Like, they're not really being forced into anything, or, there's one awesome school and then, 3 schools that are lukewarm on. Like, there's a lot of these guys are talented enough where they can pretty much go wherever they want. So that's going to keep the majority of the commitments to June and July. And, of course, Penn State already has 11 commitments as it is. So, they don't want to rush it too much because they want to make sure they finish this class with some really talented players.
So we've said a couple of these names over the course of the show. Matt Zollers obviously visiting this weekend, but I want to start with Zaire Addison, one of the guys that Fitz mentioned coming to campus on Friday. Fitz, tell me a little bit, for the people who haven't caught our raving about Zaire Addison previously, tell us a little bit about the Florida offensive tackle, please.
I think that's you has been raving about him.
Huge man crush on this guy.
In terms of athleticism, in terms of there's a lot to like there, and he's been great to work with in terms of getting visits confirmed, and this will be his second trip. The one tomorrow will be his second, right?
Probably. I don't know. Anyway. I threw 3 out there.
Yeah. Well, I know 3 is a number, but I can't remember if that's including the official.
No, that includes the official visit. You're right. Okay. Sorry. Go on.
That's where I'm at with that one. But really athletic kid. If you look at his recruitment, I mean, Florida State is not only is Florida State. If you look at some of these Florida kids, it's like, okay, some of these Florida kids can slip through the cracks, and not everybody's going to go after them. But Florida State is hard on Zaire Addison, and that's going to be an issue that comes up eventually down the line. But kid really likes Penn State. He's part of that California power group, so there is some connections there and some good vibes coming from that. And he keeps coming back, and that's all you can ask for those Southern prospects right now, is to keep getting them back on campus and keep just stay in the forefront of their mind. And it's going to be Zaire Addison, I think, for Penn State. I think legitimately in the mix. You call him a dark horse because of location, but Penn State, I think, is legitimately in the mix there.
Ryan, who's a guy that you're interested in this weekend that's coming to Penn State?
And just to hit on with Addison, like, whenever you're getting a guy to come on campus for the first time at the end of the January contact period, and he circles back and does it pretty much 3-4 weeks after he could possibly get on campus again, like, that's a good sign as far as a Florida prospect goes. That's a quick turnaround when it comes to the first visit, and clearly what that first visit meant to he and his family. So Malachi Goodman, I feel like, so it's a really good offensive line class. Sean and I were talking about this the other day, a really good group of offensive linemen visiting this weekend. Goodman has been one of those guys that we've circled for a really long time now as a priority prospect for Penn State. There's not a lot of tackles in the region that are still available. Of course, Penn State has one quality tackle already. They need to get another. And Goodman has been that guy that they have really kind of circled for months now. So won't be easy with him, though, either. His scholarship list blew up in January. He's got a bunch of quality visits. He will be back for an official visit down the road, but there's a lot of really good schools after the Paramus Catholic offensive tackle. So good to get him back. Got to keep chipping away there. That recruitment got a lot more difficult in January. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I like you mentioned a lot of good offensive linemen, maybe not as many tackles, but looking at Addison, looking at Goodman, they fit this offense in different ways because they need run blockers in this offense. And Goodman, he's a strong kid. And then Addison is a super athlete. So different flavors, but I think, this offense can adapt to some of those things. So that's just an interesting note and kind of thing I've been thinking about with this, trying to recalibrate what this offense is versus some, what they've been looking at previously. 2026. Do we want to go to 2026? Do we want to talk about some of the other guys on the list, Fitz?
I want to say that Malachi Goodman is really good. I know we got him as a 3-star on 3. I don't butt heads with Charles very often, but I think he's a 4-star guy. I think he's a top 150 guy personally, but that's just me. Georgia official visit there. He was just out at USC, and I think that's kind of the thing that I wanted to get into here. USC is on a tear right now. They seem to have figured out NIL, and that's not just like reading the tea leaves. They actually came out and said, I think we figured out NIL, and that's scary because you're going to pull in guys. You're going to pull in an Elijah Newby from across the country. You're going to have one of those shock decisions, and it's going to end up being a Penn State prospect at some point. So like, be ready for that. It's not a situation where I know the outcome and I'm telling you just to prepare you, but like, given what we've seen in the storylines, it's going to happen at some point. USC is going to snipe somebody that Penn State's after pretty heavily. And that's going to be something that you have to deal with because USC seems to have figured out some things. So that's not ideal news for Penn State, but I just wanted to get that on the radar because USC, they stole Georgia's lunch this weekend, and that's not an easy thing to do considering how successful Georgia has been. So that's been really, really unique storyline to watch on the national level, and it's going to affect Penn State at some point. It's going to affect Ohio State at some point. It's going to affect Notre Dame, Michigan. It's going to affect a lot of schools all over the country because of the appeal of going to Los Angeles and all that kind of stuff. It works for some people. So I think that's something to work with, something to talk about. And Malachi Goodman was just there this weekend. He's probably going to go back for an official visit this summer. I'm not saying that's the guy, but like, USC is somebody that you're going to have to be wary of this cycle if you're a fan of any team. So that's going to be interesting to see that play out. You mentioned
Matt Zollers isn't taking an official visit we don't know about, right?
Give it a week. We'll see. He wasn't visiting Bama at this time last week, and now all of a sudden there's old Kalen DeBoer.
Can I sidetrack us for 1 second, just because I'm curious?
This whole podcast is a sidetrack, so yes, please.
Perfect. Does NIL frustrate you guys? Because I know that you're not hoping a player goes to Penn State or goes to a different school, et cetera, but I just the undercurrent of the conversation, and Ryan saying like, I don't know what other schools are offering. Does it make your job harder, and is it a frustrating variable for you that it's just like, well, okay, like relationships, we understand all those things, but here's this giant thing that we can just slap on the table, and then the conversation kind of dies. It seems like sometimes.
For the majority of our, go ahead, Sean. Go ahead.
Now you go for it.
I would say for the majority of our career, Sean, we could say follow the visits, follow the relationships, and you could predict things. I feel like that's a lot more difficult. Not saying that doesn't still happen. It does. But it was like 80-90% hit rate. And now I feel like it's not 50-50, but like maybe a little bit 60-70. Do you understand? Like it's not as easy to follow.
You can do everything right. You can do everything right as a recruiting staff, as a coaching staff, as a program. And then all of a sudden just have your legs kicked out from under you. Have your legs kicked out from under you. And just all of a sudden, this guy's going elsewhere. It's why, you see predictions that are kind of like all of a sudden turn at the last second. Let's say Steve Wilfong's the best in the business. Like he's the best. And all of a sudden, like you've got guys that are telling him that they're going somewhere. And then all of a sudden an offer comes in from out of nowhere and sweeps this kid off his feet. And then he looks bad because he had the right information. And then all of a sudden it turned on its head. But at the same time, it's been difficult to nail down that final thing because of the money involved, because of the way that you recruit. And yes, it's been frustrating to see, because especially for a staff like Penn State, a recruiting staff like Penn State that does so many things right in terms of relationship building, in terms of getting the parents, in terms of getting them, and all of a sudden, and this isn't new to college football. It's been happening for 40, 50 years where programs will come in and throw a bag of cash. Now it's not regulated, but now it's kind of part of the normal lexicon here. So
they throw it on the table, not under the table.
I think that's kind of that's what everybody is adjusting to. That's what everybody is kind of thumbing their nose at. But it's been interesting until we get some sort of collective bargaining where it kind of levels some sort of playing field, or maybe not necessarily the playing field, but maybe the practice field, like getting in that radar. That is that is how I view this whole thing. So you can do everything right and all of a sudden just get swept up at the end, tossed over the top rope, and you lose the rumble. And that's a tough way to go.
And the last thing I'll add real quick, T-Frank, hold on. A lot of these major NIL true X's and O's or dollars a dollar, whatever, dollars and cents, like a lot of these conversations come very late in the process. So they have them earlier on. Remember, coaches used to not be able to even discuss it. Now they can after that court ruling. But it used to be like coaches do everything that they can, and then your collective comes in at the end and figures out what they could. And obviously that's not really how it's been working, but that's how it was supposed to work. But my point is just, you can, as Sean said, you can do everything right. And then at the end, some school's going to throw massive amounts of money that player X didn't expect. And that's where everything just gets thrown for a loop.
Yeah. And I think that the hope for Penn State is that they're at least on the biggest or the second biggest boat. So like if there is something that levels the playing field, they'll at least have a seat at the table on the boat. I had to somehow make those metaphors work together. So I guess finishing up our visits for the weekend, who else stands out to you guys that you want to talk about here, Fitz?
Kevin Brown, 2026 from Harrisburg. Every time I'm going to get the chance to talk about him, I'm going to talk about him. He has blown up on the national level. Alabama, Georgia, Auburn, Florida.
I love that video. Sorry. That first clip is just incredible.
Yeah,
Sorry.
he's just tossing kids. Tough kid. Really technically sound as well. So Ryan, I think he would not fit the guy that you're talking about last week in the show that got such a renowned response. So we appreciate the feedback there.
No, he's a tough SOB. We'll leave it at that.
So anytime you can get Kevin, like he just went out and checked out a bunch of big time schools down south. So get him back. Refresh him on everything that you've done so far. I think Penn State's done a really good job of recruiting him so far, prioritizing him. And I think that this to me is a potential 5-star kid right here. Just there's so much to like about him as an offensive line prospect.
Ryan, you want to echo some of those sentiments? You want to talk about Kevin Brown, or you want to go with somebody else?
Yeah, I think he's definitely, we've been talking about this Central PA group for a long time with Mickens and Elias Cook and a couple other guys, and of course Tyler Merrill. And I definitely have him as the one that flashes to me the most. And that's, I don't normally say that for an offensive lineman. So I think that speaks, really highly to just how athletic and what he could eventually become. As far as other guys visiting this weekend, we did skip over Quincy Porter. I don't know. Actually, I guess I don't know if that was actually out there. So sorry if I should have mentioned it, Sean. But he is a really important wide receiver recruit for Penn State who hasn't been on campus in a year now. And, certainly, I mean, Sean brought it up before, like if there's one guy they could land, he is probably that guy, or if not, certainly top 2 or 3 in that group, maybe with Khalil Lockett, some others. But just getting him back is really important. Are they going to land him? It's going to be tough. He did admit that he's going to go see Michigan and Ohio State soon. And, we'll see if Penn State's able to get an official visit down the road. But it is his first visit in, I think, a little bit over a year. So want to note that. The other one I would just mention is David Davis, too, player I'm pretty high on out of a Monty Christian. We have him, I think, a little bit too low right now. I feel like I think he's 5th or 6th in the PA rankings, and I could see him moving up into that top 5, maybe top 4 down the road. I think Penn State's very high on him. He had a messed up elbow, I believe it was last year, which kind of derailed his season a bit. I think that kept stats down. It kept maybe schools looking at his film or having his film pop, I guess you'd say. Kind of kept his offers down. He's around 15 or so, I believe, right now. I really think spring evaluation period and maybe even in the next season, he could be a guy that takes off. So David Davis, remember the name. He will be back this weekend.
Speaking of running backs, last thing I got here, it's in the chat. I wanted to save it here for the end, but Brad Moeller asked this question. With both the State College running back and Messiah Mickens moving to Harrisburg, what are the pros and cons of moving schools? And this is something that's happening a lot. You can talk about Keandre Barker moving schools several times, Beckham Kritza moving schools several times. This is different than that. But just generally, what are the pros and cons of moving to a different high school? Ryan, do you have a thought here? I got to go to you because it's Harrisburg.
Who's taking it? Yeah. This is interesting. So I would say for Mickens, it doesn't surprise me too much. He's originally a Susquehanna kid. It's not, he was traveling all the way over to Trinity all the time. And, there's multiple reasons for it, but I think Mickens is fine. Sheffy's the one that's really interesting to me. Like I think it's risky if you're Sheffy. Would you agree with that, Sean? Just because of what Mickens is, he's going, again, Sheffy's already played at 6A. So it's not, it's not like he doesn't know what he's going into. He's going in the same division. He's going to play State College. But just having Mickens there and some of the other athletes around him, how does that help his recruitment? It may work out. We'll see. But it's an interesting one. Mickens, I get it. Sheffy, I don't quite get it.
Well, Fitz, go ahead.
I agree with that. Mickens, I think, is talented enough to go anywhere. Now, the other thing here, Harrisburg's got a lot coming back. They've got Sean Lee playing quarterback, Sean Lee Jr., whose father played at Penn State, Sean Lee, different Sean Lee. They've got Nehemiah Ewell, I believe is the running back. He was really good last year.
Yes.
And it's going to those guys are not just going to walk in there and take all the snaps from this kid. So I'm very curious to see how this works out. Especially, I agree, especially with Sheffy, because I think that Mickens is on a certain level. He's an undeniable talent. Sheffy's got some work to do. So we're going to see how he fits in. Maybe fits in as a receiver. Maybe he fits in at another position. But it's a risk when you go from the big guy here in State College to Harrisburg, where you might, I don't want to say get lost in the shuffle, but the potential is there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And hey, it's a risk for Mickens too, to some. I mean, he was playing 2A. I mean, It is a big jump. So I think we all agree he's talented enough to handle it, but it still will be a massive jump. And I'm very curious to see how it plays out.
Awesome job, guys. I know we got a holiday weekend coming up, so we'll be covering Penn State football recruiting still. I know I got stuff coming up from just taking a look at the tape of some guys that are going to be visiting. My boy, Zaire Addison, I'm going to be taking a look at his film. Spoiler alert, I'm a huge fan. Really anything you guys got coming up you want to talk about, Fitz?
The recycling truck is coming up the street, and I haven't put up my recycling yet, so that's where my focus is right now.
All right, well, let's get going then. That's the end of the BWI Live show because those things are important. You're right. I did not put the garbage out today. I'm already probably over. So that'll do it today for the BWI Live show. We'll be back next week to recap all this stuff, talk about Penn State football practice, all of those things. Great time to subscribe here to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Of course, the bluewhiteillustrated.com. We'll talk to you then.